interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Then they said after that telephone call did come in, the telephone call was to double the guard on all anti-sabotage positions because they still thought it was going to be sabotage along with everything else, I guess. So as we passed radio station KGU, there was a bomb dropped just beside us practically. Evidently they were trying to hit radio station KGU to cut out the communications.
At first, the United States had one simple goal: to stay neutral and to isolate itself to the extreme. To enforce these beliefs, Congress passed the Neutrality Act of 1935, which strictly prohibited any war-related shipping to foreign conflicts, though President Roosevelt was urging towards helping the Allies in any possible way. Also, in the summer of 1940, 79% of all American people agreed that staying out of the conflict was the best way to avoid dilemma. That soon changed on December 7, 1941. While the Germans were preparing for an attack on Moscow in Europe, Japan suddenly pushed against the United States, attacking Pearl Harbor on Oahu Island in Hawaii.
Almost at 8 o'clock, I think about 5 minutes to 8, she come and tried to wake me up. She said, "Come on, better hurry, get up, we're being attacked." I said, "Nobody's attacking us. I can just leave me alone and I want to get some sleep." And she said, no, come on, the whole harbor's on fire." And I said, "That can't be." So she finally convinced me to go out and look at it. And sure enough, the whole harbor was smoking and on fire.
The attack surprised the Americans, since Japan showed interest in peace. With a successful aerial attack and a submarine attack, 18 ships were hit, killing 2,335 servicemen and 68 civilians. The ships sunk included the USS Arizona, the USS Oklahoma, the USS West Virginia, the USS California, and the USS Utah. Every ship but the USS Arizona and the USS Oklahoma were all later raised and repaired. The United States was frozen into a mood of shock and had to respond immediately. The day after, on December 8, 1941, the United States and Great Britain declared war on Japan. The diplomacy behind it was a great deal. When the vote came for entering the war in the Pacific Theater, all but Representative Jeannette Rankin of Montana voted positive. The United States had decided to break the Neutrality Acts. 4 days later, Hitler declared war on the United States, later making them one of the chief suppliers to the war in Europe. However, years before the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1935, the United States wanted to stay neutral and respond to Hitler without war or peace, though it disturbed them to see the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party. There were many factors of the United States making the big decision to enter the war. 3 factors stood out, which all converged at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. First, the Neutrality Act of 1935 was a perfect way to stay out of the tragedy that was about to happen. The United States had learned from earlier experience in World War I. They did not want to get dragged into another money-consuming war. Also, though in the state of neutrality, President Roosevelt slowly and quietly shifted the country's military and diplomatic apparatus onto an anti-fascist war footing. He urged to side with the Allies. Finally, the Nazis' repeated acts of aggression pushed many countries, including the United States, to act against them. In 1936, a Neutrality Act, which is even more stricter, was placed to prevent absolutely any war-related relations between the United States and foreign nations in war. The act really did not need to be placed, because in late 1936, nearly 95% of all Americans still did not want to join the war in Europe. In 1937, 94% did not want to aid the Chinese in their effort to defeat the attacking Japanese, even though the 1937 attack on Nanking, titled The Rape of Nanking, was atrocious in the eyes of the Chinese. As a reaction to the crisis in Asia, Congress passed a more stringent Neutrality Act, banning ships from carrying passengers or goods to warring nations. On November 9th through November 10th, 1938, Nazi stormtroopers and citizens organized a pogrom, or a state-sanctioned anti-Semitic riot, on the Jewish population of Germany and Austria. The day was known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. 91 Jewish people were killed, and many more were injured. More than 30,000 were taken to deadly concentration camps, like Buchenwald, Dachau, and Sachsenhausen. The Holocaust had just begun. By now, aggression from the Nazis was clearly visible. Yet, 84% of all Americans still voted against aiding the Allies. President Roosevelt, in an attempt to revive the country from a Great Depression, multiplied his efforts in getting Congress to change their opinion of the country's status about the upcoming war.
But nothing was ever done. We didn't declare war or anything. And the only time we declared war is when the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. And I think that what Roosevelt wanted to do, as I understand it, he wanted to get us into the war, to get us out of a depression. And people were living on $10 a week, $12 a week, and people had very little money. Well, this country was really in a depression. And I'm going to tell you something. I was beginning my second year of teaching. I was teaching over in Augusta County. Now, Augusta County was mainly an area where the farmers raised crops and everything like that. And it's amazing how many people in Augusta County didn't favor us being in war. Because they were in a farming area and they were making money on raising crops.
In 1938, Hitler annexed Austria and then demanded the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. When Czechoslovakia prepared to defend the land, French and British diplomats met in Munich to negotiate a peaceful settlement for the conflict. It was then settled. Hitler could possess the Sudetenland as long as he no longer had wishes for expanding. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned back home to England, claiming that he had achieved a peace for our time. This was not a promise that would have been kept. On September 1st, 1939, Germany took Poland, and Congress decided to allow shipment of military supplies to warring nations in Neutrality Act of 1939, as long as the country repays the debt. This greatly helped the bankrupt British and French military. On May 10, 1940, Hitler launched a full-scale blitzkrieg on France, declaring war on them. Less than 6 weeks later, the French government was forced to surrender. Still, after the British stepped up to fight, 4 out of 5 Americans did not want to enter the battle. By now, President Roosevelt was trying to find a way around the Neutrality Acts to do whatever he could. Through the next 2 years, Nazi Germany continued its conquest on Europe, while Japan continued attacking Asia. It all led to December 7th, when all of these problems converged, when the Second World War grasped the United States into its clutches. After the attack, Roosevelt called on Congress for a mass expansion of the armed forces. The Army was divided into 3 commands: the Air Force, the Ground Forces, and the Service Force. Not many were trained, but 9 million men were planned to serve for just the Army, which would be divided into 215 combat divisions. The United States had many decisions to make regarding the war, and many of them were brought on by other countries, like Japan and Germany. After all of the events that happened, debates flew on whether the United States should stay in a neutral state or enter the war. Many wanted to stay away from another money-consuming era, while others wanted to avenge the lost lives in Hawaii. In conclusion, after the United States entered World War II, a huge alliance of massive power aided the Allies. As a consequence, this power fueled the men and the supplies to win the war.